The courtroom air was heavy and cold. I sat stiffly next to my lawyer, facing my father, Arthur. He was a picture of false sincerity in his $1,000 suit, commanding the room with his presence. This was the final hearing to divide my recently deceased mother's estate, and Arthur was on the stand, lying effortlessly. He looked across the room at me, his gaze full of contempt. "She is financially and emotionally unstable, Your Honor. My late wife's entire estate, the land, the antiques, and the business, belongs to me and Spencer, where it can be managed properly." The judge listened, nodding. Arthur's lawyer then added the final crushing demand: "We also require immediate possession of the small cottage Audrey currently occupies for asset consolidation." My breath hitched. He wasn't just taking the money, he was making me homeless. What the hell just happened to her? "My name is Audrey Vance. I am 27 years old, and for my entire life, I was the daughter my father, Arthur, wished didn't exist, constantly measured against my golden twin brother, Spencer. That moment in court, where he tried to erase me completely, was the moment I realized my mother's final secret was the only thing that could save me. I didn't argue. I didn't interrupt. My lawyer, Mr. Miles, placed a steadying hand on my arm. Arthur's face was smug, convinced he had won. I forced myself to look small, to look defeated, the fragile girl he always expected me to be. The judge looked at me with pity. That pity fueled my resolve. That night, I went straight to the dusty, hidden corner of the attic where my mother had told me I would find the truth. She passed away 3 months ago, but her mind had been sharp until the end. She told me, "Audrey, I have left you a defense. Use it only when he threatens your very home." Behind a stack of ancient photo albums, I found it, a small, heavy, metal box wrapped in dark velvet. Inside, there were no jewels or cash, only 3 encrypted hard drives and a tiny, handwritten note from my mother. The note read, "Access with the code 0719. This is your protection. Only use this when he is most exposed. Remember the name, Operation Nightingale." My hands trembled as I carefully stored the drives. I knew that name was the key to everything. My mother, before she became withdrawn and sick, was a brilliant bookkeeper, running the administration for Arthur's vast local property development company, Vance Holdings. Arthur believed she was just managing paperwork. But I knew the truth. My mother had spent the last decade meticulously documenting every single instance of tax fraud, undisclosed property flips, and outright money laundering that formed the real foundation of Arthur's wealth. He thought his secrets were safe, burned in his private office fireplace. The next day, I started my research into Operation Nightingale. The code 0719 was my mother's birthday. I used a secure, anonymous computer at a local library to access the drives. The amount of financial crime was staggering. There were hundreds of documents detailing illegal cash transfers and dummy corporations used to hide millions of dollars from the IRS. Worse, there were detailed ledgers connecting Arthur's company directly to several high-profile local politicians, implicating them in the money laundering schemes. My lawyer, Mr. Miles, called me, sounding anxious. "Audrey, your father is pushing the eviction immediately. He wants you out of the cottage by the end of the week. We need to appeal." I kept my voice calm. "Mr. Miles, I want you to appeal only on the grounds of temporary emotional distress. I need Arthur to believe I am fighting him emotionally, not strategically. I need to buy us 3 weeks, until his Crestwood Heights deal closes." The Crestwood Heights deal was Arthur's massive, final luxury development, the last step in cementing his family's legacy. I knew the Crestwood Heights deal was Arthur's weak point. The financing relied entirely on the undisclosed, fraudulent profits detailed in Operation Nightingale. If that financial foundation was exposed, the entire multi-million-dollar project would collapse, taking Arthur's reputation and freedom with it. I had to let him get close enough to the edge that one small push would send him over. My twin brother, Spencer, called. He had always been Arthur's puppet, arrogant and entitled. Audrey, just sign the papers. You're making Dad stressed. Take the small cash settlement and disappear. You don't belong here. His condescending voice made my blood run cold. Spencer, I replied, I won't disappear. And you should check the property tax assessments on Crestwood Heights. I hear the foundation permits are questionable. I planted the seed of doubt, watching his confidence waver before he angrily hung up. I needed one key ally, Judge Hammond, the man overseeing the estate hearing. My mother had mentioned him often. They were old friends from their college debating days. I knew Judge Hammond was ethical and deeply respected my mother. I couldn't tell him everything, but I needed a way to alert him that the man before him was a liar without breaking my silence on the full evidence. I scheduled a private, brief meeting with Mr. Miles. I explained the code and the name. Mr. Miles, I want you to prepare a sealed emergency motion for a federal financial review, not based on fraud, but on suspicious asset valuation. I want the only identifying phrase in that motion to be Operation Nightingale. You submit this motion sealed, to Judge Hammond only, during the final hearing. Mr. Miles looked at me, astonished. You have something massive, don't you? I simply nodded. The day before the final hearing, Arthur demanded I come to his new office to sign a few final papers. I went, dressed simply, playing the role of the defeated, impoverished daughter. Arthur sat behind his huge mahogany desk, sipping expensive whiskey. Look at you, Audrey, he sneered. So predictable. Your mother left you nothing but drama. At least now I can move on with Phoebe. I watched him carefully. Phoebe was the young woman my mother had tracked, Arthur's affair partner, whom he was secretly supporting with the illegal funds. I saw a small, framed photo of Phoebe tucked behind his desk clock. I spoke softly, looking away. Phoebe seems nice, Dad. I hope Spencer likes his new stepmom. The mention of Phoebe and Spencer together visibly unsettled him. He quickly changed the subject, worried I knew too much about his private life. The final court hearing arrived. Arthur was demanding everything, including my mother's small, personal antique collection. He was smug, knowing the judge was ready to sign the final eviction order for the cottage. Mr. Miles gave me a small, encouraging nod. He had filed the sealed motion exactly as I requested. The judge began to summarize the decision, favoring Arthur's legal argument. Arthur leaned forward, a triumphant, greedy smile splitting his face. He looked directly at me, savoring the moment of my public, final destruction. It was time. I locked eyes with Mr. Miles. Mr. Miles then addressed the judge, his voice clear but carefully low. Your Honor, before you sign the final order, my client has one final statement regarding the asset valuation of Vance Holdings. He paused, looking at me. The judge, annoyed by the interruption, looked down at us. I leaned forward, my face pale, looking directly at the judge. My voice was just above a whisper, intentionally low enough that only the judge, the court reporter, and my father could possibly hear. I looked Judge Hammond straight in the eye and whispered two specific words, Operation Nightingale. The effect was instantaneous and shocking. Judge Hammond, a man known for his unflappable composure, stopped mid-sentence. His hand, which was reaching for his gavel, froze in the air. His eyes, fixed on me, grew wide, and the color completely drained from his face, leaving him a shocking white. He glanced quickly at Arthur, then back at me, a silent, terrible question hanging between us. Arthur, who had barely heard the words, saw the judge's reaction and went rigid. Your Honor, what is the meaning of this? What did she say? He demanded. The judge didn't answer Arthur. He simply looked at the court reporter and said in a strained voice, Recess. 10 minutes. Everyone but the counsel and the court reporter leave the room. The judge's demeanor had shifted from annoyed to deeply, fundamentally alarmed. During the recess, Judge Hammond reviewed the sealed motion Mr. Miles had submitted earlier. I watched through the narrow, high window of the hallway as the judge looked at the phrase, Operation Nightingale, and then immediately requested a confidential phone call to the Federal Financial Crimes Task Force. He didn't even speak to Arthur's high-powered lawyers. My mother had foreseen this. Years ago, knowing Judge Hammond would likely handle the estate, she had secretly given him an envelope containing a single cryptic note. If Arthur ever threatens to destroy Audrey completely, contact the FFC and use the code, Operation Nightingale. She had set a trap only an ethical friend could spring. The court came back into session. The judge did not sit down. He stood, addressing the room, his voice now deep and grave. Due to compelling and highly confidential information presented to this court concerning the financial stability and legality of Vance Holdings, all assets, including the estate of the deceased, are hereby frozen pending a full federal financial review. The motion for the eviction of Audrey Vance is denied indefinitely. Arthur jumped out of his seat, screaming, "Frozen! You can't do this! This is a joke! What is Operation Nightingale?" His arrogance had finally cracked, revealing the desperate criminal underneath. Judge Hammond looked directly at Arthur, his face filled with cold disappointment. "That, Mr. Vance, is a question you will be answering to federal investigators very shortly." The final, devastating twist. The news of the frozen assets and the federal inquiry leaked immediately. Arthur's entire Crestwood Heights deal collapsed within hours. His business partners abandoned him, terrified of the federal scrutiny. His favored son, Spencer, suddenly realized his own trust funds were frozen and called me, begging me to explain what Mom did. I simply hung up on him. I never had to show the hard drives in court. The threat of the evidence, channeled through the judge, was enough to stop Arthur cold. I stayed in the cottage, legally secured and safe. A week later, Arthur and Phoebe were spotted leaving the country, though they were soon detained. The news reported Arthur was facing multiple charges of tax fraud and money laundering, all thanks to the evidence meticulously gathered by my mother. I stood in my little cottage, making my mother's favorite tea. I was alone, but I felt stronger and safer than I ever had. I had survived his abuse, protected my home, and secured my mother's justice. I walked away from the entire toxic family, legally vindicated and financially secure in the small, simple life I always wanted. My dad lost his entire criminal empire simply because he underestimated the quiet strength of the daughter he called unstable. If you felt the chill of that courtroom, you understand. Respect is non-negotiable. My worth wasn't defined by my father's sneer or the house keys he tried to steal. My story proves that the quiet ones, the underestimated ones, have the most devastating power. He tried to make me homeless while I was fighting for my mother's memory. If this resonated, if you've ever been gaslit into invisibility, share this. Tell them, your intelligence is your armor. Your silence doesn't make you weak. Your survival is the greatest win. Hit that subscribe button for more stories about turning deep humiliation into pure, ethical triumph. My father lost his entire criminal empire because he never looked past the quiet girl in the corner. You were always worth fighting for. Have you ever had to prove your worth to a family that underestimated you? Share your story in the comments below and don't forget to like and subscribe.